She said, "What if I slept with another man?" I said, "Then I'd leave." She laughed and called me too emotional. But the man she chose over me ended up cheating on her and disappearing without a word. I'm 34, and for nearly a year, I thought I was in a relationship that, while not perfect, was at least safe. Her name was Vanessa. We had our highs and lows, just like anyone else, but I believed in the foundation we were building. Steady days, quiet nights, a sense of emotional security that I mistook for mutual respect. There were no big red flags. Nothing screamed trouble. I thought we were just two people learning to grow together. That was until one ordinary evening shifted everything. We were sitting on the couch in her apartment, a blanket draped over us, a movie playing in the background that neither of us were fully watching. She'd had a long day, and her usual playful energy was muted, but that wasn't uncommon. I didn't think twice about it. Until, out of nowhere, she picked up the remote, muted the TV, and looked straight at me. Her face was calm, almost too calm, as if what she was about to say meant nothing. Then she asked, "What would you do if I slept with another man?" At first, I thought I misheard. I turned toward her slowly, my brain struggling to catch up to what she had just said. I blinked, trying to gauge whether she was joking, but her expression gave nothing away. "Why would you ask me that?" I said, not accusatory, just genuinely confused. She shrugged. "It's just a question. A test, kind of. I wanted to see what you'd say." And in that moment, something inside me shifted. A small, subtle crack formed in what I thought was a solid relationship. I wasn't angry yet, just stunned. That kind of question didn't sound like a joke. It felt like it came from somewhere real, some hidden corner of her mind that I hadn't been invited into yet. It felt loaded, like she was trying to gauge how much she could get away with. I took a deep breath, then said, "If you truly loved me, that thought wouldn't even cross your mind. But if you did sleep with someone else, I'd walk away. No fight, no drama, just quietly out of your life." Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she let out a dismissive laugh. "You're so emotional," she said. "You take everything so seriously. Love isn't some rigid contract. People push boundaries sometimes." I didn't even raise my voice. I just sat there processing. "You think love is about testing boundaries with hypothetical betrayal?" I asked. "You think that's how you measure devotion?" She just smiled like I was the one who didn't get it. And then I asked a simple question, one that flipped the conversation around entirely. "Okay, what if I said I slept with another woman?" She didn't even pause. Her smile vanished instantly. "That's cheating. I'd leave you." Her tone was final. "Non negotiable." And in that moment, the hypocrisy was so blatant it felt like a slap in the face. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, letting that sink in. She could play with the idea of cheating and call it a test, but if the tables turned, it was suddenly unforgivable. It wasn't just a joke anymore when it wasn't on her terms. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in my head. Not because I thought she had already cheated, but because she could speak so casually about something that cut so deep. I realized that love meant something very different to her than it did to me. I started to pull back, not as revenge, but as a defense mechanism. Something in me knew that this relationship had just taken a turn I couldn't unsee. The following week played out like a performance. We still texted good morning, still sent memes, still had dinner plans. But beneath every word was a question I couldn't unhear. What if I slept with another man? And the casual way she framed it. It's just a test. I couldn't pretend like that was nothing. I couldn't unfeel that discomfort. I began observing her differently, not out of paranoia, but because the trust one thought was there now felt like it was built on sand. One night, I was over at her place. She was cooking dinner, half listening to a podcast, scrolling through her phone. She was smiling, humming along to a song between chopped onions and boiling pasta. And all I could think was, how can she be so at peace after what she said? How could she play with the concept of infidelity like it was a party trick? I finally said, "Can we talk?" She looked up, surprised by my serious tone. "Sure," she said. I didn't dance around it. I've been thinking about what you asked me the other night, I said. About sleeping with someone else. The fact that you called it a test, that's been sitting with me. She raised an eyebrow. You're still thinking about that? She said, half laughing. I nodded. Yeah, because it wasn't just a random comment. It said a lot about how you view relationships. If you feel the need to test me with something like that, we're clearly not on the same page. Her smile dropped. Are you seriously making this a big deal? She said. I told you it was a joke. You're blowing it way out of proportion. But I stayed calm. Maybe you meant it as a joke, but it didn't feel like one. And even if it was, it still shows a mindset that I can't align with. You want me to be okay with the idea of you sleeping with someone else just to prove I love you. But if I said the same to you, you'd call it cheating. You said it yourself. She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. So what now? You're going to walk away over one comment. I took a moment. It's not just one comment. It's what that comment revealed about the kind of relationship you want versus the one I want. She looked stunned. She didn't think this would actually cost her anything. She tried to walk it back then. Okay, I'm sorry. It was dumb. I get it. But you're seriously going to end things over this. I said the hardest word I've ever said in a relationship. Yes. And that word hung between us like silence after a thunderclap. She didn't say anything for a few seconds after I said the word, yes. It was as if the weight of that single syllable took a moment to sink into her skin, to reach her heart, if it ever truly did. She just stood there, looking at me like I had just torn down everything she thought was secure, like I was the one being irrational. Come on, she said finally, with a smile that tried to mask panic. I was kidding. You're really going to throw this all away over a joke. She reached for my hand, trying to laugh it off, but I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I simply pulled my hand back slowly, gently, like I was saying goodbye without words. No, you weren't joking, I said calmly. You were testing me, and I might have failed your test, but I passed my own. That was the last real conversation we had. I picked up my keys from her coffee table, walked toward the door, and before I left, I turned back one last time. Not with bitterness or anger, but with a kind of finality that comes when you realize you've seen a person's true face, and you can't pretend you didn't. Find someone who sees love the way you do, I told her quietly. I hope it works out better next time. Then I closed the door behind me, and that chapter, at least from my end, was over. In the days that followed, I didn't spiral, I didn't drown in grief, I didn't beg her to reconsider. I just focused on healing. I deleted our photos, cleared the message threads, unfollowed her on social media, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I needed space to regain my balance, to reconnect with my own peace. And for a while it worked. I didn't hear from her, and I didn't reach out. I was done playing games with someone who treated loyalty like a toy she could disassemble whenever boredom hit. But life has a way of looping back. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. And this time, it returned like a whisper that slowly built into a roar. About 3 months later, I was out grabbing drinks with a couple of mutual friends. The vibe was light, casual, full of nostalgic jokes and catching up. Until one of them casually mentioned her name, Vanessa. And just like that, she was back in the room without even being there. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I just kept sipping my drink and listening as he spoke. You know, she started seeing some new guy right after you two broke up, he said. Turns out she'd been texting him before you even ended things. I just nodded. It didn't surprise me. Somewhere deep down, I think I already knew. That question she had asked me, it wasn't hypothetical after all. She was already thinking about another man, already preparing to replace me. But what came next did surprise me. Well, that guy, he ended up cheating on her, my friend continued, shaking his head. She called me crying one night, said he just disappeared on her, ghosted her cold.
No explanation.
Nothing. Another friend jumped in. She said he made her feel like she was just a fling, like he was never serious from the start, totally used her. Then poof, gone. I didn't say much, just sat there quietly. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't smirking. I wasn't even angry. What I felt was something deeper, something quieter, validation. The very thing she had mocked me for taking seriously had come crashing down on her in reality. The man she had either been flirting with or planning to replace me with had done to her what she'd only teased me about. But there was no what if this time.
No hypotheticals.
No tests. Just brutal, unforgiving truth. She had thought she could replace loyalty with excitement. That she could trade stability for flirtation. But the guy she chose instead? He didn't sit down and talk through his feelings. He didn't give her a chance to explain. He didn't ask her any questions. He just took what he wanted and vanished without a word. And somehow, that's what finally made her cry. I never reached out to her. Never sent a message gloating or guilt-tripping. She made her choices. I made mine. We walked separate roads. And now the consequences had finally met her at the end of hers. I heard later through the grapevine that she'd asked around about me. That she was wondering if I was seeing someone. That she had said to one of our mutual friends, "He was actually a really good guy. I just didn't see it back then." But by then, I was already gone. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There was no bitterness left, only clarity. No rage, only resilience. Sometimes life doesn't serve you revenge with a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it just hands people the natural consequences of their mindset, their choices, their games. The very test she had once played with me became her reality. And this time, there was no one to laugh it off with. No one to hold her hand and explain what love really means. I didn't need to say anything. Karma had spoken loudly enough. In the months that followed, I didn't carry around bitterness like a weight on my chest. I didn't replay the hurt like a movie on loop, or fantasize about what-ifs or what-could-have-beens. What I carried was simpler, a calm, quiet kind of clarity. The kind that comes only after you've watched someone reveal their true self, and then watched life reflect it back to them. I realized that emotional maturity isn't measured by how much you're willing to forgive repeatedly, or how many tests you can pass to prove you're worth loving. It's measured by how well you recognize what you deserve, and how fearlessly you walk away from anything that doesn't reflect that. Vanessa thought love meant testing boundaries, poking at trust just to see what would break first. But that's not love. That's insecurity masquerading as depth. Real love doesn't demand proof through threats. It doesn't ask, "What if I betrayed you?" just to see you squirm. Real love creates safety, not scenarios. It builds a foundation of loyalty, not hypotheticals. And it certainly doesn't punish you for expecting the same respect you give. Somewhere along the way, I learned that you don't need to chase closure from people who show you their disrespect with a smile. The silence they're left with after you walk away will speak louder than anything you could ever say. And when life comes back around, as it always does, it won't be your job to witness their regret. Because by then, you'll be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere stronger. Somewhere healthier. Somewhere that doesn't require you to justify your boundaries or explain why faithfulness shouldn't be a game. I've moved on since then. Not just from her, but from that entire version of myself that used to second-guess his instincts. I'm no longer the man who tries to rationalize red flags because he hopes things will change. I'm the man who pays attention, speaks his truth, and walks away when someone laughs at his standards. And sometimes, late at night, I still remember that moment on the couch, when she turned to me so casually and asked, "What if I slept with another man?" Like it was nothing. Like love was a game you could pause and resume without consequence. And I remember how she laughed when I said I'd leave. But life has a way of laughing last. And this time, it wasn't me who was left wondering what happened. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever walked away from a relationship that tried to make you doubt your worth, know this: you weren't too sensitive. You were just honest. And you deserve a love that never asks you to prove it. Like, subscribe and stay tuned for more real stories about love, loss, growth, and everything in between.